So after Giuseppe's speech and this introduction, I guess we start from Europe. And I quote you. You said, "We need deeper integration of the Eurozone. It requires completing the banking union, building a fully fledged capital markets union, and in the long term, a stabilization function for the Eurozone budget. Our strategic autonomy must be considered at European level and not at the level of one member state." Now, this is pretty much what President Draghi and Letta's reports have been saying on European competitiveness. So what should Europe look like if you could design it from scratch, and how could we get there?
Well, good question. First of all, thank you for your invitation. Thank you, dear Giuseppe, and thank you, dear Andrea. As Giuseppe said, we are at a time of total uncertainty. And to face a time of total uncertainty, you need very strong beliefs. And you need to stick to those beliefs. If I had to design EU from scratch, I would insist on 3 points. First of all, you need a more united European Union. Because the fact is that Europe has not become a union yet. On the financial market, for instance, you have 27 European markets where you need one single European market to fund the necessary investments for the 21st century. Second, you need Europe to be more rapid. And I would strongly advocate for what I would call a go-fast approach. We don't need councils, commissions, reports anymore, even if I want to commend the excellent report made by Mario Draghi. We need decisions. And I can come back to the best way of deciding in the EU. And third, we need a more simple Europe. Less norms, more innovation. Less prudencia, more risk-taking. And my very last point about the EU of my dreams would be to have a European territory being less a merchant and more a political superpower, having global and strategic view for the future. Let's take 2 examples. What is the kind of relationship we want to build with China? If there is anybody in that room who said in one single sentence, "Here is our choice vis-à-vis China," please speak to me. We know the strategic approach of the US vis-à-vis China. They want to remain the first superpower in the world. And they want to weaken China. We can dispute this position, but this is a political position. What is the European position vis-à-vis China? Let's take a second example, which is a key issue, and of course we will come back to that issue over our talks. Eurobonds. We strongly need Eurobonds, not only for supporting the necessary investments in the future, but also because there is a unique window of opportunity to make the euro currency one of the most powerful currencies in the world, reducing the cost of trade between Europe and other countries, making Europe a key player on the financial world market. Either we put the Eurobonds on the table and we do it, or the euro will never play the role it could play in the 21st century.
So thank you for laying out the big macro picture, starting to drill in on our main competitors, which you mentioned. US and China are the leading blocks. How can Europe not fall behind? And what are Europe's strengths? What sectors do you believe are at risk? And which ones should we preserve?
Well, I think that the first point for Europe, as Mario Draghi said, is to act as one single power. So the first question before coming to the strength is governance. And I really want to draw the lessons of my experience. We need a total overhaul of the European governance if we want to play a role between China and the US. What does it mean concretely? First of all, we need to implement the subsidiary principle. It's up to the Commission to take decisions on some fields. It's up to the member states to take decisions on other fields. But if everybody, both the Commission and the member states, are doing the same, of course it is totally inefficient and it is very time costly. Second, we need to have one single presidency. There is no superpower with 5 presidencies. My proposal would be first to get rid of the so-called rotating presidency. That's a very funny idea to say, well, every 6 months you have new European priorities. For Latvia, it will be the EVs. For Italy, it will be something else. For France, it will be the defense issue. And every 6 months, the European power is changing its priority because of this rotating presidency. It's quite a dream idea, but it is totally inefficient. Over the past 10 years, China has had the same strategy and the same view. My second proposal on the presidency would be to merge the presidency of the Commission and the presidency of the Council. Do you really think that the President of the Council is playing an efficient role? And I'm not criticizing the current presidency. He is a very good friend, and I don't want to jeopardize my friendship with the President of the Council, but by the way, it is totally useless. So these are my 2 proposals: getting rid of the rotating presidency, merging the presidency of the Council and the presidency of the Union. Third, you have to go from the unanimity rule to the qualified majority rule. On many topics, for instance, on the tax issue, on the capital market union, on the banking union, either you move from the unanimity rule to the qualified majority, or you will never take the necessary decisions for Europe to move on. And the very last proposal would be to have the possibility for a limited group of member states to move on critical issues. We have, for the time being, an excellent relationship between Merz, Meloni, and Macron. Let's move on. The 3 of us, France, Germany, Italy, all together, this is the best way of having things changing in the right direction. Then coming to the strength of Europe, I would say that we are a superpower which is not aware of its strength. But we have strengths. And if we are comparing our strengths to China and to the US, we should be proud of it. We just have to build on our own strength instead of complaining every day about our weaknesses. First of all, we have a single market of 450 million consumers, the richest in the world, by the way. We just have to act as one single superpower instead of having 27 markets. Second, we have the best class scientists and researchers. Our problem is the possibility to go from science to factories. This is the real issue. We have the best scientists, but we are not taking the right decisions to build factories from these scientists and researchers. Third, we have a very strong greed of innovation. Fourth, we have one of the best financial industry in the world. And Mediobanca is a very good example for that. And France could be also a very good example for that. And Germany could be a very good example for that. But the tricky issue and the ununderstandable issue is that we are putting hurdles against our own interest. Basel III, Solvency II. We are creating hurdles and rules that nobody is abiding, neither in China nor in the US. So if you look at the market, of course the US are taking more and more market share in the EU because they are not abiding by the same rules. So if you want to have your strength being developed in the future, we have to change the rules on every topic I mentioned, starting by Solvency II and by Basel III, that must be absolutely changed, improved, and simplified to make us more competitive.
So thank you, Bruno. Zooming into one of the topics you just mentioned, while you were finance minister, President Macron sparked controversy by suggesting that a takeover of Société Générale by a foreign bank would be part of the market. He said, we cannot say that we are for the union of capital markets and the banking union and say they were going to engage in protectionist among Europeans. Why have we not had progress on key files like banking union, capital markets union, and now on common European defense?
Well, that's, I think, two different issues and two different explanations. On capital market union, I tried, I failed. Over the past 7 years, I prefer not to make an account of the total weeks, months, and years I spent on that issue for, I would not say no result, but a very limited result. I think that I have exhausted more than 4 German finance ministers on that question, starting with my best friend, Wolfgang Schäuble, then with Peter Altmaier, then with Olaf Scholz, and lastly with Christian Lindner. We did not register any progress. I think that the single progress that we made is to overcome some technical hurdles, like the question of supervision. Supervision was a critical issue. I think that the idea of having a 28th supervision body instead of trying to merge the 27th supervision existing bodies is the right solution and one point on which we could build. But there is one critical issue, which is the question of insolvency. Until we did not fix this question of insolvency, which is quite a technical question, but behind that there are huge financial interests, you cannot make any progress further. My proposal would be to overcome those technical issues, which are quite critical, by giving a political lead to that question at the highest level. I'm not speaking about the finance ministers, I'm speaking about the head of states. And the critical issue is to make the public opinion aware of what is behind this technical question. Behind this technical question, the capital market union and the banking union, there is just one single challenge: the future of the EU. If you want to build bridges, infrastructures, if you want to invest in AI, in chips, the cost for investing in chips and to try to catch up to China and to the US is around 50 to 100 billion euros a year. The total cost of the fight against climate change is between 100 and 150 billion euros a year. It's out of reach for public money. You need private money, and private money would be provided by the banking union and the capital markets union. So we have to go from a technical approach to a political approach at the highest level, explaining that what is behind the capital market union is simply the future of the EU. Then coming to the defense issue, it is more a political issue, and I really think, coming back to my first question, to act not as a merchant, but as a superpower and political empire, we have to think about 2 questions. First, who takes the lead on the European defense program? At some point, it becomes critical to know who is the leader. It's fine to say, well, it's a common program, a coalition of the willings. You have Germany, France, Italy, Leonardo, Dassault, and other critical industries from Germany. But at some point, on the defense program, you need one single leader. Who is the leader for the SCAF? You have today the Bourget summit near Paris. Either you define the leader for the SCAF or you will never see the SCAF. The second key question that we have to address is what is our strategic goal vis-à-vis NATO? We need NATO. But we must be aware that the US, and when I say the US, I'm talking about the Obama's administration. I'm talking about the Biden's administration. I'm talking about the Trump's administration. They are all the same. They don't care anymore about Europe. And they don't want to care about the security of Europe. There is no strategic interest behind that for them, and it is very costly. And if one single head of state, one single European politician still thinks that the US does care about the European defense, they should do another job.
Very clear. So moving to another point you touched on, Eurobonds. How did you come up to the adoption of Eurobonds during COVID? And how can Europe implement now the large investments for defense and green transition without them?
Well, I would say that we came to Eurobonds thanks to coffee. I mean that it required a lot of sleepless nights with Olaf Scholz when he was finance minister to go from the strong old German position about the Eurobonds to the adoption of the Eurobonds in 2020. I just want to recall one anecdote once again with my deep friend Wolfgang Schäuble. When I started as a finance minister in 2017, I went to Berlin, as any French finance minister does when he's appointed as the French finance minister. And I had a talk with Wolfgang. I knew him for a lot of years. And he told me, well, Bruno, we will have the press conference. You can talk about anything you want, but the Eurobonds. This is a total red line for the German government, and it will remain an absolute red line for the German government over the next 10 years. So I did not speak about the Eurobonds. 3 years later, I'm not talking about 30 years later. 3 years later, I was in Berlin, in the building of the German finance minister, talking with Olaf Scholz during a whole night about the Eurobonds. 1 week later, we were in Hamburg, in the city of Olaf, adopting the principle of the Eurobonds. And 1 week later, we were with Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron adopting not only the principle, but the decision of creating Eurobonds for a total value of 750 billion euros. The reason why we took that decision was, of course, the COVID crisis. And I have one single question. Why is it that Europe, under the pressure of a political or health crisis, is able to take radical decisions that have been needed for more than 10 or 20 years, and at a time where there is an absolute necessity of investing in the future for AI, for chips, for the fight against climate change, we would not be able to build once again on new Eurobonds. So I'm a strong advocate for the Eurobonds. But I also want to take into account the concern and the legitimate concern of our German friends. So I would make a linkage between the creation of new Eurobonds, the adoption of the banking union to also mobilize private funding, and the commitment to come back to sound public finances. This would be, to me, the right and wise triangle that could lead to a stronger financial market and to a stronger Europe. New Eurobonds to invest in the future, a capital market union to mobilize the private funding, and of course, the commitment to come back to sound public finances and to reduce the burden of the public debt to meet the concern of Germany and many other countries.
Thank you. So moving to energy independence, in Europe we have experienced the weakness of depending on others on energy. Can you give us your perspective on energy independence and how to get there?
First of all, Andrea, you are right. We have been totally underestimating the cost of the dependency on the Russian gas and the Russian oil. And the cost has been really very heavy, explaining, I would say, more than 50% of the rise of inflation in Europe over the past 3 years. So we have to draw the consequences of our failures and not to do the same mistakes in the future. And for that, my method is always the same: to put some questions and to provide some very clear responses. 3 questions on the question of energy independence. First of all, let's be a little bit provocative. Do we really stand for independence? That's the first point. When I'm listening to ideas floating in the air that, well, maybe at some point it might be a good idea to reopen Nord Stream 2. Or it could be a good idea to recreate a linkage between Eastern countries and Russia. I met Orban, it was 3 weeks ago. And when you are discussing with Mr. Orban about the relationship with Russia, he's explaining very bluntly to you, well, we need an energy cooperation with Russia. So first of all, we have the 27 of us, the 27 member states, to respond to that question: do we really stand for independence? Because independence is costly. I stand for European independence. And I stand for European independence in energy, because without energy, you cannot be a political, neither an economic superpower. Second question, do we think that renewable energies will be sufficient? My response is quite clear: no. I'm not an engineer. And this is why I'm so much working with many engineers to better understand the challenges behind those questions. You will never have neither a scientist nor an engineer explaining to you, well, you can be a very strong industrial manufacturing continent with renewable energies. It's an illusion. It's a lie. Just look at the facts. China is building 2 nuclear plants every year. The US is a very strong nuclear power. Russia is a very strong nuclear power. Saudi Arabia is building nuclear plants. Many other countries are thinking of the possibility to build new nuclear plants, either EPR or small and medium-sized reactors. Many countries are thinking about the best way of getting access to the fusion technology. So my response is quite clear. If you just build on renewable energies, you will not keep your industry, and you will not keep your economic strength for the 21st century. I just want to recall one fact. Data centers. A big data center is requiring the energy of one single nuclear plant of 1,600 megawatts. So if you want to have data centers, you cannot rely on renewable energies, you must rely on nuclear power. And since I'm in Milano, I really hope that Italy at some point will join the club, because we need the technological skills and the industrial strength of Italy to join the coalition on nuclear. And the very last question is, are we ready to invest in the nuclear energy? And my response is once again, yes, of course. I've been struggling really very hard to have the nuclear energy being recognized in the European taxonomy as not a green energy, but as a zero CO2 emitting energy. Now it has been decided, so it's up to the financial institutions, to the banks, to the insurance companies to invest in nuclear energy. I think that once again, the future of the EU is at stake.
And so connecting to what you just said, how can Europe catch up in tech, meaning artificial intelligence, chip manufacturing, and innovation in your view?
You know, on tech, I would say exactly the same as I said about our strengths and weaknesses. We should not too much emphasize our weaknesses. We should try to better understand our strengths and build on our strengths. If I start with the weakness, I think that it is clear for everybody in that room that we missed the historic opportunity of the digital revolution. And this explains why the EU is lagging behind in terms of growth, productivity, and jobs. And I would say also in terms of wealthiness. Europe in the 19th century was the first continent in the world to make the industrial revolution. In the second industrial revolution, we were also on the forefront. But on the very last one, which is the digital one, we missed the opportunity, even if we had the best industries, the best scientists, and the best competitors. Let me recall that Nokia or Ericsson at that time were the leaders in the tech industry. What happened? We decided that the first priority was price and the consumers. We have to change our priorities. Our priorities must be growth, productivity, and production. I mean manufacturing and tech production. Less competition between European industries and European leaders, more cooperation, more integration, and I would say more consolidation. I know that this is a very disputed issue. I just give you my very strong belief on the basis of 25 years of political experience. It's time to have this radical overhaul of the political goal for Europe to move from a consumer's approach to a production approach, to the idea of competition, to the idea of cooperation, to build European champions able to face the competition with China and the US. Then on the strength, we have on the tech issue 4 key elements. The first one is that for AI and chips, we have the best research and scientists lab. Just want to recall the existence of the IMEC lab in Belgium or the CEA in France. These are world-class tech labs. Second, we have very strong chips companies. I would quote ST Microelectronics, the French-Italian company, even if sometimes it can create some disputes between our two countries. It is quite a successful story. We have Infineon in Germany, and Germany has many assets to produce best chips in the world. Third, we have data centers moving to Europe and opening their doors everywhere in Europe. And fourth, and I must confess that I am working for that company, so I'm not neutral on that point, we have one world-class company called ASML, which is the only company in the world which is able to produce 2 nanometers technology chips. Looking at the situation in Taiwan with TSMC, TSMC cannot provide 2 nanometers chips without the components of ASML production. So we just have to pull together those assets and those strengths and to define a realistic strategy. When I say a realistic strategy, I mean that the idea of getting 20% of market share over the next 10 years is totally out of reach. 10% would be great. Since the production of chips is exploding in the world, if we stick to 10%, well, it will be great. And the second objective must be to get access to the 2 nanometers technology. If we are just creating chips for the automotive industry from around 35 to 100 nanometers, it's a waste of time and a waste of money. If you don't have the state-of-the-art technologies, it's useless to invest in chips. So you need more volume, but you also need to get access to the 2 nanometers technology by building a cooperation with either Samsung or TSMC, either South Korea or Taiwan. Just one very last sentence. You noticed that the first CEO that was hosted by Donald Trump in the Oval Office was the CEO of TSMC, investing $100 billion in the US. This is the clear evidence that TSMC and the 2 nanometers technology is absolutely critical for the 21st century.
So moving to bureaucracy, Europe often prides itself of being good at regulating. Maybe say this is even too much. There is an excess of rules, which you mentioned before, which blocks innovation and entrepreneurship. How do you solve it?
Big question, brief response. Less Commission, more member states. Less technocrats, more politicians. I know that it's not very à la mode to praise the politicians, but sometimes politicians can be more efficient than technocrats. So my proposal would be, once again, less Commission, less technocrats, and more member states.
And so to end with the inevitable question on France, French politics has swung from being a paladin of stability and a cylinder of the European engine to representing an existential risk for the EU. What has gone wrong, and how does it get fixed? And why should the market not worry about French political risk?
Well, I will be very blunt, because that's the interest of that kind of talks. What went wrong is the so-called dissolution. The cost of political instability is huge. The price of political stability is huge also. But you know, I'm quite happy, because when I started as finance minister in 2017, for, I would say, 5 to 6 years, everybody was saying on the international stage, that's great, thanks to Emmanuel Macron, thanks to his economic policy, and I was driving his economic policy, France is back. And everybody was saying France is back. Now everybody is saying Italy is back. So that's fine. Germany is back. And Germany is investing 1,000 billion of euros for the next 10 years. That's fine. The key question is not to say, well, Germany is back, Italy is back, France is back, but at some point, Europe is back. And all together, we are taking the right decisions. We all have to do our home job. In France, we have to reduce the burden of public debt and the burden of public expenses. We have to think about the future of the welfare state. But this is the truth for France. This is also the truth for Italy, for Germany, for Spain, for every member state. What do we want for the future? Do we want Europe to be a huge welfare state, providing more help to everybody, and having the gratuity of every good as our common dream? Or do we want to be an economic superpower, very attractive from a financial point of view and getting access to the state-of-the-art technologies for the 21st century? That's a choice. And that's a choice that we all together, we need to make in an urgent manner. We know that we have to invest more in defense. Shall we do that together? Or do we still live in a dream where if there is some difficulty with Russia, the US will come to help? The US will not come to help because this is not its interest to come to help Europe. Do we want to remain a continent of science, high-level technologies, disruptive innovation? And in that case, let's be very clear. We have to put less money in the healthcare system and in the retirement pension system, and more money in the universities, in the scientists, in the labs, and in innovation. So, of course, France, for the time being, is not in a very good shape. I hope that it will change in the very near future. I'm quite happy to see my German and Italian friends being so successful, because I'm always very happy when my friends from Italy and Germany are successful. But at some point, the key question is not to see whether Italy, France, Germany are successful one after the other. The key question is to have all European member states being successful all together to face the rash competition with China and the US.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bruno.
Thank you, Andrea.